Hello and welcome to Band Literature Reviews with Brandon Searles. Band Literature Reviews is a series that evaluates concert band music from the perspective of a small school director. This is episode 2, Marches. In today's show, I will discuss 3 pieces of concert band music in the march style: March of the Irish Guard, On the Mall, and National Emblem. I hope you enjoy episode 2, Marches. Hello again, everybody. Thank you for coming back to my second episode. These 3 marches are really great standard marches. I've played 2 of the 3 of them, and they are all very, very good quality marches. And of course, I wish I could cover a bunch of other different marches as well, but we all know how many marches there are out in the band world these days. So, without further ado, we're going to start with the first march, which is March of the Irish Guard. Let's go ahead and take a listen to that. Alright, let's get into discussing this piece. So once again, that was March of the Irish Guard. This is an arrangement by James D. Ployhar. The key signature is concert E-flat major, and of course, like we mentioned, the style or genre is a march. It is considered grade level 2. It's about 2 minutes 15 seconds long, 72 measures. The publisher is Carl Fisher Incorporated, published in 1970, the arrangement that I have. And the tempo is listed as 108 beats per minute. And this is actually not in cut time, which I'm going to talk about more here soon. So, a little bit about the arranger here, James D. Ployhar. He's an American composer-arranger. He composed mostly for school-age groups, but has a few more challenging pieces as well. Some of those pieces include Crazy Clock, Korean Folk Song Medley, and Cool Blues for Trumpets, among many others. Now, talking about the grade level of this piece, I would say this is a tough level 2. The main reason that I say this is because there are 2 meters that are present in this. There's common time and 6/8 time. Part of the consideration as well is the stated, but not always written out, march articulations between the short staccatos and everything that we know makes a march what it is without it being notated in the music. The other thing to consider is the low brass melody that they have that you certainly heard at different parts in this. The recurring baritone, euphonium, trombone melody line. It definitely takes a more confident low brass section to be able to pull that off. I would also say that the main melody is fairly easy though, especially for a confident middle school woodwind and trumpet section. So there are parts of it that are very approachable. There are parts of it that would be a little bit of a challenge. So as far as the instrumentation is concerned, there are 3 clarinet parts. Only one of those 3 crosses the break. There are 2 parts each of alto sax, trumpet, horn, and trombone. And then there are 3 percussion parts, which are snare drum, bass drum, and crash cymbals. The tuba, bari sax, bass clarinet line is independent from the trombones and baritones. And so because of that, that's like a step up from some of the pieces I was discussing in my last episode, where all of those instruments were just combined together and for the most part had the same lines, no matter which parts played what. The last thing I was going to say is the baritones mostly double the tuba part as well, but there are obviously some moments where they have their own moments to shine. Talking about the ranges and the challenges, the trumpets go to an F at the top of the staff, and I personally think that middle school players should be able to play that by the end of middle school. I've got an 8th grade trumpet player that can reach up there pretty reliably overall, and so that's not something that would scare me away from trying this piece, for example. Once again, as I mentioned before, there's the mature low brass melody. This is definitely going to be challenging to emulate the melodic style of the trumpets in the upper woodwinds. So when the melody passes between those, it's going to be very easy to compare the different approach between the higher winds and these lower wind parts. So if they're not super agile with the way that they play, it's going to sound comparatively bad compared to the trumpets and the clarinets and other more agile instruments in our bands. So as I mentioned before, the unspoken quote-unquote march style, it's not overly notated, so I would say this shouldn't be your first march that you take on with your group. I would definitely approach this if your band is really starting to understand what a march is and is able to emulate that style without it necessarily being notated before you attempt a march like this. As far as rhythms and percussion parts are concerned, the rhythms aren't overly challenging, except for the 6/8 time part, which is like the really fun, like Scottish bagpipes sounding part, where there's a brief interlude at the middle of it, especially with the low winds and the percussion. From there on out, I would definitely say, at least in my band's situation, that I probably wouldn't attempt it for that because they've had little to no experience playing in 6/8 time. As such, in 6/8 time, there are a lot of dotted rhythms, and there are mostly straight quarter notes, eighth notes, and half notes, which are more approachable. But I've noticed that with the dotted notes, my groups tend to get a bit more confused a little more easily. But if your band understands dotted rhythms and so on and so forth, then feel free to attempt this one. Lastly, the percussion parts are fairly straightforward. There are lots of snare drum rolls that are very important. For some younger middle school players, that might be a bit of a challenge, but as long as you have a mature snare drum player to kind of lead the rest of the group, I think that would end up being totally fine. I would say it's approachable, but be cautious about it. It's not for all small schools, it's not for all middle school groups, but if you have some really strong high school players that are looking for a decent challenge where they're not going to be sitting bored, staring at a grade 1 piece and thinking, okay, here we go again, one of these really easy pieces. This is a really, really great way to bridge the gap. To bring it all together, here are some of the keys for success. Number 1, it's a great diversion from the typical cut time march. And as such, playing in 6/8 time is going to be very, very important. Another key to success is there's only one clarinet part that crosses the break. I found that with my group, with the diverse ages of all my clarinet players, there are some that can cross the break, but not many. Having only one part that goes over the break instead of all the parts, that kind of makes it a little bit easier to approach. The other thing I was going to mention is this is a relatively short piece. It's like the length of a normal grade 1 piece of music, which is great. So that makes it not as overly complicated. This is also a great intro into European style pieces. Like I mentioned before, and the thing that I've been hammering home with this particular piece is that the 6/8 time can be a make or break moment for your band. I would say if you haven't made a foray into 6/8 time before now, I don't think it would be a great idea to give this a try. The next key to success is having a strong low brass section, especially trombone players. The melody, especially at the end, would be something that they might not be able to handle. I see the trombones being the key ingredient here to being able to play this well. Baritones should probably be able to play the extra stuff, especially if they switch from trumpet, but trombones might not have that same experience to be able to play agile and more quickly moving melodic lines. I would also say if your percussionists aren't comfortable playing rolls, then that would also be a key to success that you would want to have in place. So making sure that your percussionists are capable of playing, especially those rolls, especially in 6/8 time. If they don't know how to do that, that would be a bit of a concern. Lastly, I would say the last key to success would be having more than 3 clarinets in the clarinet section. If you don't have 3 total clarinets or more, then there's going to be some harmonies that are missing there that are pretty important. And so I would say that that's a make or break moment as well. But like I said, overall, this is an approachable piece for a small school from my perspective. I would overall recommend it. Just consider these keys to success that I mentioned before this. Now let's move on to our next piece, On the Mall by Edwin Franko Goldman. Let's take a listen. To get to the discussion on this piece, the first thing I want to say is this is not the recording of the one that I have in my library, and I did a lot of searching to try and find it, but it is unfortunately out of print. So this will be kind of a more generic review of this particular piece, and keeping in mind that you won't be able to order the one that I am talking about here. However, I will give some alternatives for you to consider to be able to get access to this piece. So, once again, this was On the Mall, composed by Edwin Franko Goldman, and my arrangement is done by Andrew Balent. However, there are a lot of other arrangements, and once again, I will get into that a little bit later. The key signature is concert B-flat major with 2 flats. Once again, the genre or style is a march. It's considered grade level 2 in this format, but the other versions of it are quite a bit harder, I would say. The length of this piece is about 2 minutes flat, and it's 81 measures. It was published by Carl Fisher Incorporated in 1987, and the tempo is set at 120 beats per minute in cut time. A little bit about the composer, Edwin Franko Goldman. He was a very famous American composer, active during the early 1900s, so he's a contemporary of Sousa, and then also of the next piece I'm going to talk about, the composer E.E. Bagley. He has one other really famous piece of music besides this one, which is called Chimes of Liberty, and that's also available at a number of different grade levels as well, if you wanted to look for something similar by him. A little bit of information about the arranger. Andrew Balent is an American arranger, and he has done a lot of arrangements for younger groups. And I can say right now that I have a lot of his pieces in my library, mostly that I inherited from previous band teachers before me at my school. Even still, I would probably be ordering a lot more of his stuff as time goes on. So, like I said before, this particular arrangement of it is not in print anymore, and so you won't be able to access the Andrew Balent version. However, he does do some other marches and other rearrangements of more classic pieces from not only just march pieces, but even some stuff coming from the Romantic era, the Classical era. I would say that this grade level is overall correct, and it's a very good simplified version of this piece. The instrumentation, there are 2-part on a lot of things, including French horn. There is an allowance on the trombone 2-part, so if you don't have a lot of trombones, it'll be covered by the bassoon and baritone part. The percussion parts are pretty basic. You can do it with 3 to 4 players. There is a separate isolated tuba part that only the bass clarinet doubles. Usually the bassoon or the bari sax is added on, not in this case. It's just the tuba and the bass clarinet. Overall, this is not too demanding of an instrumentation for a small school, so I think that would be a feasible option. Talking about ranges and challenges. The trumpets go up to a G above the staff just once, and there's a optional alternate E instead of going up to the G. There are a few awkward leaps over the partials in the melody, though, that the trumpets would have to do. If your brass are not super confident on being able to switch between partials, especially skipping a partial, then this will definitely be a tougher piece for them. The trombones go up to a high F above the staff. The horn part is very manageable. It only goes up to a C in the staff, which is great for French horn. There are a lot of middle school French horn players that can really only play up to that high C, maybe a D above that, and even then not super consistently. And then lastly, there's one clarinet part that goes over the break, but the other does not. Moving on to rhythms in the piece and percussion. There's nothing that's way out of the norm. There are a few snare drum rolls, once again, but we all know to expect that, especially in marches. It would definitely be approachable for your snare drummer as long as they know how to do that. All of this is in cut time, so there are no time signature switches. As such, there are not a whole lot of complicated written out rhythms. There are some dotted like quarter notes, dotted half notes, and tied notes, but once again, as long as they've finished about a year, maybe 2 years of the beginning band method book, whatever one you're using, they should be totally fine with the notation they see there. The articulations in this are pretty standard. The standard accents, staccatos, slurs, and a few marcatos. So, to bring it all together, my overall recommendation would be, yes, I definitely think this could be approached in this particular arrangement or a similar one by a small school, both with instrumentation and skill level. For me personally, I wouldn't do this with my group right now because my group is grade level 1, grade level 1.5 maybe, being approachable. They're kind of in that cusp because I have a lot of 6th grade players this year, which is great. So, that being said, a few keys to success. The parts are easy to cover. You can rearrange parts easily. There are lots of doublings with the exception of the bass clarinet and tuba part. There is only one clarinet over the break out of the 2 parts. This is not a terribly demanding piece for trumpets. There's more singing and whistling in their part. And that makes things a lot easier. And this would be a really great chop break song, as I would call it, because they're able to spend a lot of the time doing the whistling parts and the singing parts instead. And this will allow you to really open things up for your 2nd and 3rd or even 4th piece in whatever program you're doing. And makes it so that they're not being demanded of right from the get-go, because we all know that we usually start with a march. If we have a march at all, we're going to start with it. So this would be a nice intro into that and make it so that they don't have to bust their chops nearly as much. The French horn part, like I said, is really middle school friendly. This arrangement also makes a classic and standard repertoire march approachable for a very young group. Like, this is one of those like real standard marches that basically everybody knows and makes it approachable so that a middle school group can play an authentic piece of music. There are very few classic standard repertoire pieces that are approachable to a middle school group, and this makes one of them very approachable. I would say also your band needs to have singing and whistling experience. The hardest part of this is if you have a really small middle school band, it's going to show if they don't know how to sing or if they don't know how to whistle, because it's going to sound really thin and not supported. So that would be a point of emphasis. For me, that wouldn't be too much of a concern because a lot of my band kids are also in my choir. There would be enough commonality there and enough skill there for my stronger singers to carry the group and help the few other ones that don't know how to sing and bring them up to a good singing level for it. I would also say you need to have some confident clarinets. They carry the melody a lot of the time. They're one of the only ones that are playing the melody during the whistling and singing part. If your clarinets are kind of getting lost because of the thin texture and they struggle with a lot of hesitation, then that's going to end up being an issue for you. Once again, you're going to need to have a tuba or bass clarinet or have the capabilities of rewriting, say for bass guitar, like I mentioned in my last episode. That's what I do. I rewrite the tuba parts when necessary for bass guitar. And lastly, I would say they need to have some experience in marches or cut time. Otherwise, if they haven't had that experience, I would choose a march in not cut time before doing a march like this one, especially one considered a standard, quote unquote. Lastly, to get to the other arrangements, there are 2 other versions of this that are commonplace and still in print. The first one is the Charles Booker version. It's not the greatest recording on J.W. Pepper, and it is a bit harder than this particular arrangement of it, but not by too much. Lastly, there's the Ed Fisk edited version. It is authentic and really stays true to what Goldman intended when he first wrote it, just adapted it to the more modern ensemble. It's really, really, really hard, but once again, nice and authentic. So if you're looking for a more authentic experience and you have a band that can do it, that would be the arrangement to go to. Now, let's go ahead and move on to our last piece. So this was National Emblem by E. Bagley and arranged by Calvin Custer. This has two key signatures in it, Concert E-flat major and Concert A-flat major, 3 flats and 4 flats. Once again, this is in the march style. I had to go and label this 3.5, maybe even reaching up to grade level 4. So, it's definitely a tough piece overall. It's 3 minutes, 10 seconds long and 97 measures, which you'll notice the increased length contributing a bit to the higher rating. Its publisher is Carl Fisher Incorporated. It was published in 1998. The tempo is 120 beats per minute in cut time. A little bit about the composer, E. Bagley. He's an American composer. He's also a contemporary of Suzanne Goldman. A lot of his compositions were during the same time period. When I started doing this episode and doing the research for it, I didn't actually realize this, but we connected 3 of the most prolific American march composers from the same time period. So, as with the other 2 that I mentioned, E. Bagley also wrote lots of marches, and a lot of his music is not available now except for National Emblem. Moving on to the arranger, Calvin Custer. I didn't find a whole lot on him, but he did arrange a variety of concert band pieces, and mainly for more mature school bands. So, overall, he's not as approachable as James D. Ployhar or Andrew Balent. So, I would probably, me myself anyways, would stay away from more of his arrangements, but that's just me. You know your group better than I know your group, so ultimately that's your call. Discussing the grade level of this piece. This is a very tricky piece with lots of challenges. I would say that this is definitely mostly for more of the mature ensembles that really have that characteristic sound on their instruments and know the role that their instrument plays very well and are able to step into that role. I would say it feels more like a 4 grade level piece. As far as instrumentation is concerned, this is orchestrated for a full band. 2 flutes, 3 clarinets, 2 alto saxes. They even throw an alto clarinet part in there. There are 3 trumpet parts, and everything is pretty unique from each other, which makes things harder to cover. There are 5 percussion parts, and there is the isolated unique tuba part, which I don't think is doubled by anything completely. As far as ranges and challenges are concerned, clarinets and flutes are jumping up into the altissimo register, which I'll tell you as a clarinet player, that's really tough to do with anything except for like a upper high school student. Like I wasn't playing altissimo notes until at least 10th grade when I went through band. So this is definitely going to be demanding of the woodwinds, especially in that sense. Secondly, all the clarinets cross the break, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. The trombones, they get up to a G above the staff when they're doing this national anthem nod in the middle of it during the melody. They go up to a G above the staff, which that is definitely getting into high school level playing, and then some potentially, depending on how good your high school players are. The trumpets go up to an A above the staff a few isolated times, but they are regularly hitting the G above the staff. Lastly, the French horns go to a D in the staff, which isn't terrible, but it's no walk in the park either for French horns, especially younger ones. As far as rhythms and percussion are concerned, there's just about everything under the sun as far as rhythms. There are eighth notes in cut time, so stuff that moves really quickly. There are triplets, there are trills, you name it. Pretty much anything that would be fair game on every unique instrument. Something is challenging for them as far as technique is concerned. All the standard articulations are present, accents, staccatos, marcatos, slurs, etc. The percussion parts are simple enough because marches usually aren't the most challenging thing for percussionists to do. They usually prefer those really creative, out there, esoteric pieces that let them play a bunch of different instruments. This is pretty standard and straightforward. There are some roles in it and some exposed parts that if the percussion don't know what they're doing would end up getting really self-conscious, I think. But once again, this is pretty standard of high school, upper high school repertoire. My overall recommendation for this is probably not. Between the instrumentation and the degree of difficulty, you would probably need to have something like 30 musicians to be able to carry this out, 20 to 30. So I would not tackle this piece probably in a million years, and kind of makes me scratch my head a little bit as to why we have it in the library, because my school is quite tiny. Apparently, a band director in the past programmed it, and hopefully it went well for them. That's just not a reality for the group that I have right now. Once again, it's a great piece of standard repertoire, but it's not very appropriate for a small school, like I said. I would also say that even if your school is one that combines middle school and high school for band, and even has predominant high schoolers, I still don't think it would be approachable. This is a true high school level piece of music that high school players would find a good challenge in, but middle school players would just throw their hands up and give up on it overall. There might be a few isolated ones that could handle it, like your more talented players, but overall, your average middle school player would be very discouraged seeing this. The last thing that I would say is that you need to have the right numbers, like I said before, and you would need to have some really stinking confident trombone players, because they carry a lot of the melody, not just the beginning national anthem nod melody that they do, but there are some very, very important parts where they have to be very agile with their slides, they have to be very precise with the notes they hit and the intonation, and being able to carry that melody without it sounding chunky or detached too much, that would be really hard to do. Now, that being said, there are a few other arrangements that would be more approachable, that are orchestrated a little more friendly for small schools or middle school groups. Those two arrangements are the Andrew Balent arrangement, which that one is in print. Previously, the song that I mentioned before this, like I said, the Andrew Balent version was not in print anymore. But for this particular one, it is. And then the Matt Conaway edition, and that's the one that I actually ended up playing on the recording that you guys listened to in this episode. And that one's considered a grade 3. It just gives a few more options for you to be able to approach this piece of music. So I would highly recommend one of those ones if this is not approachable for your group like it is not approachable for mine. So if I wanted to play this piece, which I really, really like it and would see myself doing in the future if I could have an approachable arrangement, I would definitely do this one. There are these two ones by Andrew Balent and Matt Conaway that would be very easy and approachable, being grade 2 and grade 3. Once again, thank you guys for joining me today. Hope you enjoyed the episode. If you have any feedback, please let me know. Email me, put comments in underneath my video. Once again, you can find me at BandLitReviews. That's the channel title. And you can email me at bandlitreviews@gmail.com. I'm looking forward to the next episode. Hope you guys find some good pieces to be able to explore. Thank you again for listening, and we'll catch you next time.